Hi everybody, I'm Kathleen Connors-Brady, and this is my video on identifying points on a Cartesian graph. It is for Module 2.2, the math lesson video assignment. Today I have invited Apple to join me for my lesson, and I'll be presenting this lesson to Apple. So, Apple, thank you so much for coming to have this lesson with me on Cartesian graphs. You've been doing a really great job identifying the quadrants that we had in our introductory lesson. So now I think you're ready to take it to the next level with identifying points on the graph. Would you like to do that? Awesome. I had a feeling you would. So when we first learned about this graph, we talked about the horizontal axis being the x-axis and the vertical axis being the y-axis. So now we're going to use that information, the axes and the numbers on the axes, to identify specific points or locations on the graph. So the first one we're going to look at together is a point called 1, 4. The 1 is corresponding to the x-axis and the 4 is corresponding to the y-axis. That's always how it's going to be. When we're looking at an identification for a point, the x-axis will always be noted first and the y-axis will always be noted second. So for this, do you notice anywhere on this graph where you see a positive 1 on the x-axis? That's exactly right, right here. And what about a positive 4 on the y-axis? Right up here. What we want to do is find out where these would intersect. So what those points mean is that we're going to move up 4 spots or 4 places on the y-axis, and we're going to move over 1 place on the x-axis. And then we're going to look to see where those would intersect. So if we started moving up from the x-axis and over from the y-axis, we would end up right here. And that represents 1, 4. We could even label that point 1, 4, just so we can ensure that we've identified it properly. Now we're going to move on to a different point. 0, 4. What are you thinking? So this time we're looking for 0. I'm glad that we're having the opportunity to talk about that. Do you remember in our introductory lesson we talked about this intersection point being 0? That's a really important thing to remember because that 0 applies to both axes. So if we're looking for 0, 4, you're absolutely right that we'll be here on 0. And then we're going to move up to positive 4, and that point would be resting right on the line. We're going to label that one too. So we have 0, 4 here on the axis and 1, 4 right next to it. What about this one? 4 and negative 2. We want to look for that positive 4 on the x-axis and that negative 2 on the y-axis. And we're going to mark that point. And we're also going to label it. What about this one? When the negative number's on the x-axis? That's right. We look for the negative 2 on the x-axis, and this one's telling us to go up positively to the 3. That's exactly right. We'll mark that point and we'll label it. Could you identify negative 3 for me on your own? That's right, negative 3 on the x-axis and negative 3 on the y-axis. You're exactly right. They meet right there, and that does form a square. Negative 3, negative 3. I have a list of points that I'm going to give you, and I would like you to just continue to mark those on this graph. Do you feel comfortable doing that by yourself? Absolutely. You go ahead and do that, and I'll come back and check in on you in a little bit. I am so happy that you are enjoying this lesson. This work is really fun. And I'd leave Apple here to go ahead and identify points on her own, supporting her as appropriate, and then leave her to do it completely independently when I'm sure she has the hang of it. So that was point identification on the Cartesian graphs. Thanks.